Welcome, everybody. I'm just about to get straight into this, and we are going to take a moment and go back in time, way back in time, as Blackstreet would say. I remember in my undergraduate years, and this was way back in the day. I know I look young, but this was like 20 years ago, that there was this book that was published called Confessions of a Video Vixen by Corinne Steffens. I don't tend to use the name that she was known as in hip hop, but I took offense to how she was treated at the release of her book by our own people in our own community. And people dragged me all over the internet and for years and all over America as I spoke life into this woman and talked about how she really started my journey as a Black male feminist, ironically. And with the help of Mark Anthony Neal, who Estella and I got the opportunity to finally meet recently, these were people who set us on a path of being able to talk about hip hop in terms of not only activism, which had been done for a long time, but academic scholarship. Because I was intrigued that this was a book and that it was a memoir. And I just got chills thinking about it. And so, what did I do? Being the person that I am, I said, you know what? We need to canonize this, and I wrote an article called I Have a Name and It's Not Superhead, an analysis of hip hop's bastardizing suppression of Black female expression. And I remember publishing this article in the Hip Hop Think Tank Journal, and I was calling attention to everything. This was pre Me Too. This is pre Diddy. This is before there was an abundance of hip hop literature, hip hop feminist literature. We were studying Joan Morgan because she was one of the only ones who could contextualize this. And so it was really interesting to be able to say, listen, y'all, we're not going to take these video vixens and act like they're not women who deserve to have agency over their stories. And so that put me on a career trajectory of saying, you know what? We're going to speak truth to power. One of the things, and we'll talk about this with Estella, but one of the things that I remember Hip Hop Think Tank doing at CSUN was bringing Corinne Steffens on campus. And it was this huge issue. We had the media there and it was just full of students. Some of them were there for the right reasons and some of them were there for the wrong reasons. And I'm not going to name any names, but I still remember faces of people who were there thinking that they were going to have a personal hookup with Corinne Steffens. And I thought, well, how abusive is that? And so it's interesting because I remember telling the sundial I was nervous because I had gotten negative feedback from students, and I knew that in a space that's supposed to be highly academic, we need to keep this Black author safe and this new Black scholar safe. And so, because of the work that was done in the hip hop think tank, which we'll talk about, I want to wait for Estella to really get into it. But, these are two of my close friends and one who's now an angel. And so, that's the other thing is that we're going to work really hard to make it through this episode. But through the work of the hip hop think tank, we were able to synthesize scholarship and to take these young Black minds who were in college in the early 2000s. And I'm talking about in the Nelly days when Nelly was acting a fool on Spelman's campus. I'm talking about in the days when Top Model was on. I'm talking about in the days before there was reality shows featuring hip hop. There were no Love and Hip Hop. There was no Real Housewives of Atlanta or any of these bodies. And there was a group of students who were at Cal State Northridge in Los Angeles who said, we are going to canonize hip hop. We are going to talk about its political power. We are going to resurrect lyrics as a form of not only activism, but scholarship. And so to see Kendrick Lamar win the Pulitzer Prize, I just got chills throughout my whole body. I thought Kendrick stands on the shoulders of the hip hop think tank because we got the country started in thinking about the canon of how an incredible album like Damn or an incredible album like Kendrick does could even be considered for an international prize. And so my journey after the hip hop think tank, it was very cemented. I became a black male feminist writer, and after Mark Anthony Neal, I was able to publish in several newspapers. And I remember announcing to the world, this is how I became a black male feminist. And I talked about Nelly and Tip Drill and his behavior at Spelman. And it's just something that became a part of who I am, but ultimately it had roots at CSUN and with Dr. Karen Stanford and with Estella and Alexandria and Patrice and Sean and Jasmine and Camilo and all of the people who said, yeah, we're young, but we're smart, we're scholars, and we have something to say. And what I was trying to say was it is the responsibility of all of us, and especially Black men who have benefited so much from hip hop culture, to reframe the mainstream identification of women as much more than their body parts when we talk about women in hip hop. So, shout out to all of my ladies, ladies first, Latifa, shout out to MC Light, shout out to Lauren Hill, shout out to Lil Kim, shout out to Lady of Rage and all of the women, Angie Stone and Sequence, everybody who has lifted this community up. So I'm done. I want to get into Estella, and this is about to be an incredible episode. So I'm so excited. Now, I have been connected to Estella for about 20 years now, and through the CSUN Hip Hop Think Tank, we've traveled the country together. We've gone to the Congressional Black Caucus together, just me and her. We have a whole bunch of experiences from that. We've been to the National Hip Hop Political Convention in Las Vegas, which launched Rosa Clemente and Cynthia McKinney's presidential bid. And we saw a young Mark Lamont Hill and Davy D and a whole bunch of other people who were really speaking out for hip hop. But what you may not know about Estella is that not only is she an incredible scholar and friend, but she's actually a world famous educator. And some of the things I had to write a couple things down because I wanted to make sure I contextualize this in the right way for y'all so y'all understand the power of who we're talking to. Estella is a first generation Black Pacific Islander born on Tongva land, and she's deeply rooted in her ancestral legacy and cultural pride. She's a globally recognized educator, speaker, and organizer with nearly 2 decades of experience in arts, education, and community transformation. In 2017, she made history as the first Samoan finalist for the Global Teacher Prize, $1 million honor recognizing the world's top educators. In 2018, she received the California Teachers Association's Human Rights and Equity Award for Peace and Justice, cementing her role as a fierce advocate for equity. Estella is the founder and executive director of Education Ensemble, a nonprofit that provides young artists with brave spaces to create works of service and change. She also co created Enact, the Educators Network, where art creates transformation, an initiative connecting educators to restore self, spaces, and learners. Estella has spoken on global stages, from the Vatican to Dubai, using her voice to champion racial justice, equitable education, and youth empowerment. Her work blends organizing, artistry, advocacy, and I consider her a heart centered leader who brings he art centered heart, you get it, centered transformation to every space that she enters. This is Black history in the making. And I'm so proud to call Estella one of my dearest friends and welcome to Golden Light Academy, Estella.
Hey, that was an introduction, sir. Jeez.
No,
Thank you for having me on.
I'm sitting here having a moment and I'm holding back tears because I remember us being on patios and allegedly we may have been doing
Solo
some
cup.
very hip hop things when we were very young, but we're not going to speak about that. Like there may have been, I don't drink wine out of jugs anymore, but allegedly that may have been happening, and that's very hip hop of us.
Very. I mean, you already showed a picture with red solo cup in hand. So
So, if there's ever any questions about what we're doing, I'm so grateful to have you on. I have a whole bunch of questions for you, and really today is about reclaiming space. It's about rewriting history and allowing people to understand that, hey, there was some stuff that we did that set the ground for everything that you see, from the Me Too movement to so many different hip hop pieces, and that we're children of hip hop. So I want to start with the hip hop think tank. And can you tell us from your perspective what it was and why we were doing it?
So the hip hop think tank. At one point, I was president. At one point, I was vice president. And I like had our mission statement seared in. And the hip hop think tank's role was to really create a space for hip hop in both academia and politics. And that was my elevator pitch. But the hip hop think tank for me was it was my first true political home.
Wow.
It was it was the first space where, and honestly, probably the only and maybe the last space where I was able to really like cut my teeth as a scholar and as a researcher. It was where my whole pedagogy and practice as an educator was developed. It was also where my stance as a narrative researcher and author like grew. And I think even to get to all of those things, right? That's scholarship, that's career. But before that, it was also a safe place to do my navigating of my own identity journey, which now I refer to as a diasporic voyage, recognizing that I am first generation daughter of immigrants of Nigeria and Samoa. And it's my relationship to this land has to be contextualized in a very specific way. And my relationship to even um, my identity as Black in the United States has to be contextualized in a specific way. And it took a long voyage to get there. And Hip Hop Think Tank was the safe space for me to do all the really hard stuff at the very beginning of that journey of that voyage. Um, and it was a real communal, loving space that got me through undergrad, if in all honesty.
I feel the same way. I think, and we'll talk about the community of it a little later, but I remember I want to first start with Dr. Stanford. And, I get on, this is my mentor. I get on her case every day because I don't think she understands how important she was and is to all of our success. And it's not just me and you. They look at us and they see, okay, award-winning educators, authors, poets, but we have people who have written curriculums around the country that were hard edged. We have doctors who, Dr. Jasmine Young is out here just murdering higher education. I mean, her research is so phenomenal. There's Alexandria, who's inspiring the world. There's Garfield, who came from within hip hop as a singer and is now pushing hip hop scholarship. And you have people like our child, Ashley Jackson, who is taking over the entire entertainment industry. I mean, this was sort of the roots. I mean, what are some of the big memories that you have of work that we did together that
Well,
was meaningful enough for it to push us?
there's so much, but yeah, I mean, I definitely credit Dr. Stanford often as being one of the most important educators, but mentors in my life. She's still in my life. I'm on her case at least a weekly basis as well. It's always something with Doc, but as we call her, but she was the professor who, like her house was a safe space on the weekend, barbecues and, grabbing lunch together or dinner together. It was trying to get through undergrad, needing to get lunch, but my debit account is empty. And so she's
Mm,
like, "Oh, give Ash a ride to her art lessons, and I got money for you for groceries for the week." Like it was those things from that to girl, go to the Office Depot, get one of them packs of business cards, print out something, make something cute, print it out. I'm sending you to this conference to go present research. I remember the first time she did that. She handed me her credit card, said, "Book a flight, book your hotel, you're going to this conference." And I was like, huh? Like I had never, I was the baby of the bunch too. I was the
you
youngest hip hop
were.
think tank. And I was like, "Doc, I'm like 17. I've never really traveled by myself before." And she's like, "You're have your research ready, have your notes prepared, have a little business card, get on this flight and go." Or finding the places in the university, in the institutions to fund our trips to go present our research. There were so many situations where I was in rooms that I probably shouldn't have been in, wouldn't have been invited to as a 17-year-old undergrad. And she's like, "And like, so like you're supposed to be there. You
And
walked
did.
into the room like you're supposed to be there." She was the one who taught me there's an exception to every rule. I'd be in her office hours, freaking out, crying, "Oh my God, I missed the deadline for this scholarship," or whatever it was. And she'd be like, and she'd pick up the phone, dial the number, and figure out who she needed to talk to and work it out. She taught me that. And so I'm like forever grateful to her for that, for just always looking out and making sure that, I mean, my first times presenting, my first times publishing, my you know first times experiencing what it meant to be in the field researching, those were opportunities that she helped create
Wow.
for me. Yeah.
Wow. And we put up a picture of young us, and you know it's young because it was grainy, and that'll tell you how long ago it was. But at the National Hip Hop Political Convention in Las Vegas, which was a symposium of all of these scholars who were related to hip hop, but that were writing about politics and were writing about all these other things. And here we come as the hip hop think tank saying, well, no, we center hip hop in our narrative. We actually are scholastic about how we talk about these rappers and artists. And um, do you remember a piece that you wrote or edited that was meaningful to you from the Hip Hop Think Tank Journal?
Absolutely, there were so many. So the National Hip Hop Political Convention, I was the LA organizing chair, and we had partnered with our hip hop counterparts at UNLV to organize. So not only were we in attendance and participating, but we were part of the crew that helped organize the entire event. And don't quote me. I might have to do a little bit of Googling after, but I'm almost positive that that was the last convening of the National Hip Hop Political Convention. Um, and we were there with folks you've mentioned already, but we were there with Jeff Chang and Asheru, who wrote the music for Boondocks and is also a hip hop educator in his own right. We were there with
Wasn't
Mark
Crazy
Lamont
Legs
Hill.
there? Did Crazy Legs show up?
Yes, and Pop Master Fable, like these are b-boy legends,
Yeah.
literally creators of breaking. We were there with so many legends. Rosa Clemente, a founder of the National Hip Hop Political Convention, and so many others. the pieces I've written and edited over the years, I think of all of them, my favorite has to be If Hip Hop and COINTELPRO Had a Baby.
Mm,
That was the favorite one that I wrote. I think that one took me the longest. And that one was probably the most robust in that when I presented it for the first time, I think we were in Atlanta at National Council for Black Studies. And I'll also add, we were one of the first crews that was fighting and advocating for full hip hop panels. And I
yes,
remember us early on getting pushback, like, where does this fit into Africana studies? Where does this fit into Black studies? I'm like, what? Hip hop is Africana studies. What are we arguing here? But we had to really advocate for us to have full panels dedicated to hip hop
I
at
want to
in
stay
these
on that
academic
point.
spaces.
I want to stay on that point for a second because it's interesting you brought up Atlanta because I believe this was in Atlanta.
Yeah.
And because I see you, I see Michelle, I see Treese and Garfield, and thinking about the suit that I had on this giving around that time.
It's funny.
Now if they get me in a t-shirt and some chains and a blazer, it's a good day because I'm
Mm,
still going to be very hip hop when I show up.
yep.
But I remember being so we were trained as scholars. We weren't bloggers. We weren't, no shade to the this is before the Breakfast Club. Like we were actual scholars. We were trained in methodology. We were trained to be as journalists. And so we were American Psychological Association, and Michelle was presenting at national social worker conferences and education conferences. And we were at National Council for Black Studies conference. And, for people who are in the academy, these spaces are a very, how can I say this without being canceled? These spaces have the tendency to be very set in their ways. And so when you try to introduce new modes of thinking, ironically, it's shut down. And so I remember being in conversations where people who had been going there for 30, 40 years and presenting were saying, why are we talking about hip hop at the National Black Studies Conference? Who are these students in their 20s coming from California talking about Queen Latifah and uh, Rakim and Diggable Planets and all, who are they?
Yeah, it was a battle a lot of time, oftentimes, but having our mentor, Dr. Stanford, who was like, "No, you're going to make space for these young people for their what they have to say for their scholarship." But National Council for Black Studies was also one of the spaces that sort of once we got in there, it was also a space for us to connect with like-minded. There were other young scholars from Atlanta, from the East
Louisville.
Coast, yeah, from Louisville, who once we got together, there was like, oh, this is it. It was a whole generation of us, many of us who went into education, social work, and into the academy. But that piece, if hip hop and COINTELPRO had a baby, was one of my favorite pieces because when I presented it, after I present, first of all, the crew was teasing me the whole time I was writing it. Like they were like, "Girl, you sound like a conspiracy theorist. This is crazy. You gonna have the FBI
Well,
knocking on our door." Like it was all
like where
kinds.
we're at right now.
Exactly. And I enjoyed writing that piece. It was while I was writing that piece was also when we got Jeff Chang to come hang out with us at Cal State Northridge. Um, we so this is another thing we learned from Doc, right? No exception. There's an exception to every rule. You pick up, you call, you reach out when you want something. And I was like, I don't know how to get a hold of Jeff Chang. And Jeff Chang was someone who I'm kind of all over the place right now, but we helped develop a course called The Politics of Hip Hop at Cal State Northridge. And in our curriculum, in our syllabus, was a text by Jeff Chang, Can't Stop, Won't Stop, which I will forever credit as like one of the real first history texts of hip
Yeah.
hop. And so we're all a fan, love that book. And I sent Jeff a very long Facebook message, and he responded. And I was like, I just was wondering if you could come hang out with us at CSUN, and we can't afford you, but like if you're in the
Literally.
area. And he responded like, actually, I'll be in Cali, I'll be in SoCal. I can make my way over there. Just take me to lunch. And so we took Jeff Chang to IHOP across the street from campus because that is what we could afford. But he
I'm
spent
so embarrassed by that, like, to this day, and we just ran into like, me and you just ran into Jeff Chang a couple weeks ago,
yeah,
and
yeah,
I
he
said it in that auditorium, I was embarrassed as hell that we took
I'm
that
not.
man to IHOP.
I am not embarrassed because years later, 2022, I'm the executive director of a national organization, and Jeff immediately reconnects. We run into each other at a conference on the East Coast, and he's in my session. Of course, when he walks in, I start sweating like crazy. So I'm like, I haven't seen Jeff since I was like 18. I've always been a fan of his work, and over the years, we've corresponded via email or text. Whenever I was thinking about PhD or writing something new, he's always someone I could reach out to this day. And so over the last few years, we've reconnected and have been in touch a little bit more frequently. So seeing him when we ran into him too, it was again like seeing an old mentor. But that piece he took a look at, gave me some feedback early on in that process. So when we got to Atlanta and I had presented, um, after our panel, Dr. Akinyele Umoja, author of We Will Shoot Back, comes up to me and he says, that was brilliant. And also, you do need to be careful. And also, let me take you out to lunch. Um, and that was one of the most positive experiences I
Yeah,
had with an elder and with a scholar who was like giving me critical feedback on my work, but also helped deepen my research in a whole new way.
wow.
It was when the narrative what like narrative research became a big part of my work because he took me out in Atlanta, drove me around town, took me to Tupac's center in Atlanta, and shared all of these personal stories about his time in Tupac's life, his time with Tupac. So the paper I wrote, if hip hop and COINTELPRO had a baby, was about Rap and Pro and these police forces across the country building whole units within their departments to monitor hip hop artists across the country. It was on exposing different states and cities that had laws specifically to police hip hop artists, hip
Mhm.
hop and the hip hop community and hip hop generation. And it spent a lot of time talking about Tupac's death as and framing it as an assassination in a COINTELPRO era or so-called post COINTELPRO era. And so Akinyele helped me really deepen that work, strengthen that piece before it was final, before publication, and added this narrative layer to it that really impacted the way I moved forward in terms of my own research methods and that I chose to use, and even in my writing style and structure. Which was also heavily influenced by Joan Morgan's When Chicken Heads Come Home to Roost.
Another person who we just saw recently, and I don't, I don't fan over anybody, but I was like, Joan, do you understand who you are to us? We didn't have anybody else that there was Trisha Rose, there was a few people, but we that was somebody who sounded like us and who sounded like hip hop, and we could actually write her into our papers a lot differently because she was, a trained scholar. So shout out to Joan Morgan, one of my everlasting heroes. And you brought up policing in hip hop, which I think is something unique that we were able to really experience as well. I don't know if you remember at when we were in Vegas, one of the
Mhm.
conversations we were having, and Mark Lamont Hill, I know you're all the way up here now and you have your podcast and stuff, but you'll remember these days if you do end up catching this somehow. Um, that we were really worried about the policing of the event that we were at, for one. But there was also a big, I think it was a game or there was a hip hop concert in Vegas around that time. And the police were, they couldn't handle all those black people in that city. They could not handle all those hip hop heads. I mean, the rate of violence that I just felt with their presence alone was sending a message of y'all better know your place.
They popped up on us at the hotel. Popped up on us, cops popped up on us at the hotel. We were chilling poolside. Not even really. We were in the middle of some sessions and the pool was right there at this hotel we were at in Vegas. We were kind of off the strip at the end of the strip. And the cops popped up and started questioning, asking who we are inside the hotel. We're all paying customers, guests, and here for this conference with our badges
Hip
on.
hop T-shirts on. They're like,
And
"Oh, why do you guys have Tupac on?"
what are you doing? What are you doing? Yeah, I think I might have had an Easy E t-shirt on. And they're questioning us, trying to go through our bags. And I remember distinctly them giving Patrice a hard time because Patrice, who we love and we miss, crucial part of our crew. Whew, we lost her in the pandemic, during the pandemic, but was a kidney transplant patient and had to travel with some prescription meds. And I remember them coming up to her, checking her bag, and asking, questioning, and asking her to provide proof of each of those prescriptions. And I'm just like, but what? Why? Like, why are you even in the hotel? And of course, Patrice
At
wasn't
all.
having it.
Patrice is
Wasn't
the
having
last
to do it.
person that you wanna play with. I was scared of Patrice, so, you know, and we were very close, but, I want to take a moment because I think Patrice I knew Patrice from my freshman year at CSUN, so my entire adult life, I have known Patrice, and she, um, aside from being just a dear friend, what I used to always tell her is she was like my counterpart, as a scholar because we were both poets. Now, Patrice could sing, I tried to sing, and we both were feminists, and we would argue all the time, but we had these beautiful moments of connection. We were supposed to write a hip hop soul play together and like a musical, and I still have the notes somewhere. So, Patrice, I am going to write it for you at some point. But we lost our dear sister, and when I tell you that it just took the wind out of me, I've never really gotten over it, and I think I just put it in the ancestral space of um, people who are now angels. But we love you so much, Patrice, and thank you for everything you've done to lift us up. Do you have a Patrice memory?
Oh, I have so many, but I will say this: Patrice was one of the ones who she was hard on me. She was really tough, but in her way, in her very loving way. But she was always quick to. She was my best critic. She would push my work as far as she could push it all the time, and um, yeah, anytime I had a half baked thought and I said it out loud, she hmm, say more. and and I'd have to sit there in front of her and really work through it, and but I would get through it eventually, but I had to really work through it. And I mean, I think she was like I said, I was the youngest in the group, and I think she was tougher on me probably because of that. But she just really she also made sure that everyone else's shenanigans were not gonna like get me in trouble. Because let me tell you, James and Jasmine were like,
Who's James? Me?
we're gonna go see if, and Patrice is like, nope, wait a second.
We were
She's
off the
just a baby.
chain.
Yeah. Patrice was very protective. She's just a baby. Stop it. Let her let her be. But she pushed. She really pushed me. There were so many arguments where I loved watching you two argue, but there were so many arguments, and I arguments is probably not the right word. We were just sitting around
It was
talking
scholarly
about all
discourse,
of it. Yeah.
it really was it reminds me of literally when I watch, Giovanni, my girl Nikki, roast and go in with James Baldwin, and it's like there's so much brotherly and sisterly love there, but it's like we are going to hash it out over these issues. And Baldwin did the same thing with Richard Wright, who is was his mentor, and I just think that we had so many of those arguments. Now, our blood pressure will be going up. Sometimes we will leave the house, but and then Dr. Stanford would just sit back and just
Yep.
enjoy the conversation and egg us on. But I learned so much. It's how I sharpened my skills as a feminist, is because Patrice would say something like, "Well, how can you say that you like the Nelly song, but you see what he did?" And it. And then we're bringing in writers that we're reading, and we're referencing song lyrics. I mean, it was really Socratic and just in. I mean, it was organic
Yeah.
and just black and hip
I
hop.
remember one time she used to say it a lot, but the first time I heard her say it, I was like, she said, I am divorcing hip hop. Hip hop and I are divorced. And I was like, how could you say that? We're the hip hop think tank. What's wrong with you? It goes against our mission. Like, why would you say that out loud? And I remember having a long argument with her about it. And actually, in just like knowing we were going to get a chance to talk, I was just thumbing back through Chicken Heads. And there's a part in there where I'm like, this got Patrice written like all
All
over
over it.
it, talking about like that relationship, that really tough relationship with hip hop. And that was the first time I had heard someone really critique hip hop in that way, but it gave me the space to to love and hate hip hop, like to be really critical about all of the parts that were not okay, and to also appreciate some of it and love all the parts that make all of us who we were. Like we were really raised on it, and it was a really crucial part of our own identities. And we were able to create a space for it in academia.
I remember being in the politics of hip hop class, and I think were we in it together?
Yeah,
I think we were
with
in that class together with Dr. Stanford.
Sahara. Yeah, Sahara might have been with us too.
And I remember that was one of the classes where there were these rapid fire questions about how do you see yourself within hip hop, or not only just who's your favorites, which I'm going to ask you in a second, but it was what's your relationship with hip hop. And when I think about, for me, it was I was angry at hip hop. I felt betrayed because of the rampant homophobia, because of the rampant sexism and capitalism. And it hurt me because these were guys that I loved. I I wrote Diddy as one of my 12th grade heroes. This was a million years ago, but fast forward to today, and I'm like, what was I thinking? But that duality is
Hmm.
really important, and it's very black, to have this dual relationship where we love the black church, but we also know that it's very harmful to our community in many ways. And hip hop, I see the same way. Now, one of the things that you were, I think, at the forefront of, along with several of us, was really claiming a space in hip hop feminism, and really looking at hip hop feminism as both a political and a spiritual framework. And the women in hip hop who shaped sort of these understandings of liberation, whether it was Lauryn Hill or MC Light, or it was Lil Kim or Foxy. Eve, people who both were talking about this freedom, but from a different lens, whether it's freedom over body, freedom over what I say and how aggressive I can be with my lyrics,
Mhm.
or the ones who are like, who you calling a bitch? And so I wonder for you, um, what does it mean to be an artist that was rooted in that feminist tradition related to hip hop? I love this.
I think, I think it's because of hip hop, my identity as a feminist and my even understanding of feminism shifted. I think, in your gender studies classes and our Africana studies classes, we're learning about, the work of Alice Walker and Toni Morrison and Audre Lorde. And while they were very impactful, Audre Lorde, especially on my identity and my work, it wasn't until Joan Morgan, Michelle Wallace, Trisha Rose, that I really reframed or reshaped, or I should say, they gave me the language to help articulate, reframe, and reshape what I was already feeling because none of it felt quite right. None of it felt like it fit and like it was for me until when chicken heads come home to roost. That was when I was like, yes, this one right here. And I was reminded of it actually, like, thanks to Joan, we have Brittany Cooper, right? And
Yes.
I left the classroom about 2 years ago. And in that year, when I chose to leave the classroom, I was reading, or listening to the audiobook of Brittany Cooper's Eloquent Rage. And the first, I think it might have been the preface. I don't even think it was chapter one. I had to stop it, like, because I was on Audible and I just kept bookmarking every like 10 seconds. And I was like, let me just pause. Let me pause. Let me reflect. Let me think. But she reminded me of no other way to say it, but she reminded me of who the fuck I was,
Yeah.
who the fuck I am. That's how I felt when I was listening to Brittany Cooper's work, and it brought me back to hip hop think tank, and those early moments of me developing my consciousness as a hip hop feminist, because womanism wasn't quite right, feminism wasn't quite right, but hip hop feminism is where I choose to live. And it was in the politics of hip hop class where I started to think back, like, when was the first time that something felt awry, or I needed to I needed to assert myself, like, in this feminine way or space, or felt the need to live in between, in the masculine and the feminine, and figure out what that meant. And the earliest moment that I can remember feeling that, like, girl power, hear me roar feeling, I don't even know how else to describe it. It was the first time I saw the UNITY music video. Um, it had to be late elementary school, middle school for me, but like watching the box, watching MTV, BET.
Come on,
Um,
box. People don't know.
it
If you
was
know,
on the
you
box.
know.
Yeah, it was on the box, and I remember requesting that video over and over just so I can like keep analyzing. Like, I was sitting all the way in front of the TV screen. My dad would yell at me, get away from the the screen, but I would request as soon as I got home from school, request UNITY so I could watch it on repeat. But here, this young black woman was wearing her kente pattern in one scene, and then a biker jacket in another, blue jeans. And it was the scene where she's like, I socked him dead in his eye. Who you calling him? That was the part that like hooked me. And I wanted to hear more. I wanted to learn more, see more, do more. And that started my like love affair with hip hop, because I wasn't allowed to listen to hip hop. I wasn't allowed to, like, it was too raunchy, it was too inappropriate, all the things. And so I started sneaking, sneaking, buying singles and listening to albums, or catching whatever I could on the box. But that was the moment for me that really shaped or started that journey for me.
I think Latifah in particular, I heard, you know, they throw this term "queen of rap" around a lot, and I've always felt like, well, we've always had a queen. We've always had somebody who represents the best of hip hop in everything that she does, and who has remained hip hop in every space that she's ever been in. I mean, whether that's in Chicago, the musical, or that's a cover girl ad. I mean, this woman was in Set It Off, which is, one of the most hip hop movies that you could ever have. And the kind of class and grace that she exudes, but then is willing today to get on the mic and just
Hmm.
flow. I mean, she can sing. I think Latifah is not only underrated, but underrespected.
Hmm.
And, I think about how powerful Ladies First as a movement was, and Moni Love. And I think that what I've seen with women in hip hop is they do love her.
Yeah.
Peop
Yeah.
Queen Latifah is kind of like the mother of this, and I know that there
Yeah.
were women before and after her, and that there are rappers who some would say maybe they rap better than her, but it was the collective experience. It was the living single. It was
Yeah.
the medallions. It was the hats, and the being unapologetic. And I'm not going to talk about my sexuality, and I'm not doing, like, it was just the audacity to
Yes.
just be to just be Queen Latifah. That is
Yeah.
just
And
different.
I always felt like I remember arguing with the guys in our politics and hip hop class over her rightful place. I think I was defending her and Missy Elliott as ridiculously underrated and not talked about enough in hip hop history, for their legacies, for their contributions. Like both of these women, and Queen in particular. I remember someone pushing back saying like, "Well, her flow isn't this, that, and the other." And I was like, listen, Flavor Unit, 17 groups. She put Naughty by Nature on. Stop it. Like we wouldn't
Period.
have OPP if not for Queen Latifah. Like don't fix your face, fix your mouth. Like don't disrespect her because I mean she signed at 17 years old. She's she's in one of the most legendary rap groups before she even like is on her own solo, and has given us these super afrocentric album covers, um, album art, music videos, and is always black, always hip hop. Like she was always clear on who she was, who her identity as a black woman was also always very, very clear in everything that she did and presented. And she never, ever, ever swayed like from that.
Yeah.
She was always authentically herself. And I remember us having long conversations about what is hip hop, what isn't, and coming to this conclusion that it had to be authentic, right? Like there are white rappers that get allowed in to the culture because they're authentic to themselves, to their experience, to who they are. And there are some we go, no, not you, not that one. We're gonna let you go, right? Like I remember even Drake comes out. I remember us, coming back to visit Doc and having conversations again, and I'm being
Yeah.
like, nope, he don't get the pass because bro's on Degrassi, and actually, like, he's not authentically
And
representing the culture or himself
we
or
fully
himself.
had that conversation, and I think that's the and this is I mean, this is before Kendrick Lamar. This is very groundbreaking because we were kind of expecting at some point that there was going to be a fallout, that there was going to be a reckoning,
Here we
because
are.
it's hip hop and there has to be atonement for the choices that we make. I don't care how big you get. There's a difference between what Latifah is. I think I would say Latifah is probably the most successful hip hop artist of all time. Now, I don't have the data. Some would say, well, she doesn't have as much money as Jay or da 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 da. Da. But when I think about cultural impact, legacy, longevity, um, the being able to spread, that's what I think about. And it's not so much coming in and making some hit songs. That's one piece of it.
Mm-mm. No, it
And
was a
so I
label. It was a talk show,
activism.
journalism. Yeah, activism. It was building foundations, supporting other artists. It was hip hop, it was jazz, it was television, it was film. It was giving us one of the most legendary black television shows of all time. Like there's there would be no Friends without Queen Latifah. Like
Literally.
let's be honest.
Well, let me ask you, since we're on this, who's on your Mount Rushmore of hip hop artists?
I had a long list too of like who I would put up there. Queen is definitely in there. Um, my Mount Rushmore. Queen is in there. Lauren is up there.
Lauren Hill. Another just hasn't even been contextualized
I
halfway right.
know. And I'm looking at my list like, you really want me to pick just four or five? like,
I know it's
um,
hard.
I know. I think I'd have to put Joan Morgan up there actually.
Wow.
Queen, Joan, Lauren. Um, and I was thinking too, like, if I had to pick, bro, my list is so long. Like the I listed out a full page, 3 columns
Wow.
of who are the women that like really shaped
Say
um,
some of their names.
Queen, MC Light, Rhapsody, Joan Morgan, Gwen Ifill. I made my list. Angie Martinez, Left Eye, Badu, Lil Kim, Foxy Brown. Um, I've got Michelle Wallace on my list, Brittany Cooper. There's so many, like even who might not have thought that they were hip hop, who aren't hip hop feminism necessarily, but really helped shape, laid the groundwork for what hip hop feminists could be. And Bell Hooks and Patricia Hill Collins, Kimberly Crenshaw, these are women who really helped us hip hop feminists like shape up our work and our pedagogy, our praxis, and our like political stances. Angela Davis, and I have on here the Combahee River Collective is a part of is on my list as well. There's yeah, but
I
you know
would,
what?
you know, I would add the Obamas in. I think the Obamas are very hip hop and have benefited from hip hop. And I would also add Mary J. Blige as the queen of hip hop soul, because
I knew
that's
you were
my,
gonna add her. I left that one to
I
you.
was gonna throw Mary in, and that's my Mary and Faith. That's my bag, and I've been, working on research for almost 20 years to contextualize hip hop soul correctly, but things keep changing. And R. Kelly was a big hit for me because I was like, well, you were 40% of my book, and now you are going to be a footnote. But and now it's Diddy. It's like, well, Diddy, you were 40% of my book after that, and now we have to go back and recontextualize and rewrite. So I love that. I wonder, as we think about the hip hop think tank, and you've talked about how big of a community it was for you, but I wonder from you, um, where do we go from here? This was a moment in time. The ambulances is going off, and that's very hip hop. I'm in LA still,
Same, same.
but I wonder, where do we go from here? Like, what do we do to reclaim our space and to say, hey, y'all, there's a big part of the academy that started at a famous college, CSUN, and CSUN, y'all have taken care of us, but we have some more work to do to recontextualize our hip hop think tank.
Yeah.
To me, I think it's one of the most important things outside of Black Studies that CSUN has ever done was to have the hip hop think tank.
Agreed. As I was like jotting down notes, I'm thinking like there really should be after the politics of hip hop class, that after that class got started, that very next year we started seeing classes on Beyonce, classes on Tupac, classes on the culture and all the things pop up across the country, and in particular pop up at Ivy Leagues. And we were like, like where is this coming
Where did
from?
this come
Uh,
from?
right. And we put together one of the first exhibits on West Coast hip hop for our campus, and
Yes.
pulled up or called to the front those creators who never got the limelight, never got their stories told or documented because they didn't make a hit, or honestly there's a whole conversation to be had about how our pioneers of hip hop have been left alone and forgotten or not taken care of the way they should be.
Look at what happened to
Um,
Angie Stone.
exactly. Like,
Angie Stone literally was a part of birthing hip hop, and it's
and we don't
like
talk about
you
it.
they just have erased the
So
sequence from the. It's just it's painful to see.
it is. It really is. And so there's a part of me that sort of grieves and mourns that and wants more to be done to document. And I can't say nothing is being done to document, because some of the leading scholars who, when we were up and coming, were looking out for us. Rosa
Yeah,
Clemente, Martha Diaz, Jeff Ching, Asheru, they have continued to do their work in massive
yeah.
ways and places, from Cornell University to NYU and so many other places.
UCLA.
And right, and now we've got Lupe leading classes at MIT, which
We need to talk to Lupe immediately. I have some
really do,
we need to be yes.
really do. The way my 11-year-old, she decided she was going to MIT when she was 4, and so now that Lupe is teaching there, she really is like. And of course, my 11-year-old is very versed in Lupe Fiasco's body of work. So really can't wait to have her at MIT in one of his classes. That would be great. But I also have to give credit to social media and TikTok, and not to the folks who created those apps, but to the creators on those apps that have kept the think tank alive in the ways that, as soon as Kendrick drops a diss track, there are whole think tank pieces in TikTok, like on and on and on, analyzing and pulling
Wow.
apart all and sometimes I'm annoyed looking at some of the creators that I'm like, you're not hip hop, so I don't actually want to hear from you. But there are plenty of creators out there who absolutely are hip hop and have given us these 15-30 second think tank pieces on, the Super Bowl halftime show. I was getting text messages from former students that were like, "Miss, we would have been sick of you this week." And I'm like, you are absolutely correct, because when To Pimp a Butterfly came out, you best believe I designed an entire unit for my ninth grade English
I
class
know you
around
did because
around
I
that
saw
album.
it. And as we close, like I think this is a really good place because your impact is bigger than you really think. When I became a 6th grade English teacher, I just got chills thinking about it. I'm still a rebel. I wrote in The Rose That Grew from Concrete because you taught it in your class. And the people, even at the time, you had done it a few years before I did, and people were shook. And I just think that you've always been this forward thinking, incredible scholar, educator. And I'm so grateful for you, for the human being that you are, for the friend that you are. And we're going to reclaim our space, and we have some work to do, Estella.
Yes,
Thank
we
you
do.
so much for
Thank
coming on
you.
here.
Thank
And
you
you
for
have to
having
come
me.
back.
I absolutely will, because we didn't even get through half of the questions.
Right. We have more to talk about, and this is what we do anyways. So we're giving you a virtual hand clap, and thank you so much for your love and light. Blessings to
Thank
you, my
you.
dear.
Thank you. Thank you.
Guys, I'm so full right now, and I'm just grateful for Estella's spirit. Not only did I learn a lot, but it was great to be able to reflect and to reclaim stories in space. And so you're going to hear a lot about the hip hop think tank in the years to come because it won't be forgotten. Shout out to Dr. Karen Stanford. Shout out to Cal State Northridge, UCLA. We have some work to do. And to all the names that we lifted up, we love you guys. You will be hearing from us. Until next week, be reclamation, be humble, be truth tellers, but most importantly, be healed. Blessings over you and blessings over me.
Oh,